During her final months, Monroe lived at 12305 Fifth Helena Drive in the Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles. Her housekeeper Eunice Murray was staying overnight at the home on the evening of August 4, 1962. Murray woke at 3 a.m. on August 5 and sensed that something was wrong. She saw light from under Monroe's bedroom door but was unable to get a response and found the door locked. Murray then called Monroe's psychiatrist, Ralph Greenson, who arrived at the house shortly after and broke into the bedroom through a window to find Monroe dead in her bed. Monroe's physician, Hyman Engelberg, arrived at around 3:50 a.m. and pronounced her dead. At 4:25 a.m., the Los Angeles Police Department was notified. Monroe died between 8:30 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. on August 4. The toxicology report showed that the cause of death was acute barbiturate poisoning. She had 8 milligrams per 100 milliliters of solution, chloral hydrate and 4.5 milligrams % of pentobarbital, Nembutal, in her blood, and 13 milligrams % of pentobarbital in her liver. 280 empty medicine bottles were found next to her bed. The possibility that Monroe had accidentally overdosed was ruled out because the dosages found in her body were several times the lethal limit. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office was assisted in their investigation by the Los Angeles Suicide Prevention Team, who had expert knowledge on suicide. Monroe's doctors stated that she had been prone to severe fears and frequent depressions with abrupt and unpredictable mood changes, and had overdosed several times in the past, possibly intentionally. Due to these facts and the lack of any indication of foul play, Deputy Coroner Thomas Noguchi classified her death as a probable suicide. Monroe's sudden death was front-page news in the United States and Europe. According to Lois Banner, it said that the suicide rate in Los Angeles doubled the month after she died. The circulation rate, her funeral, held at the Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery on August 8, was private and attended by only her closest associates. 288. The service was arranged by Joe DiMaggio, Monroe's half-sister Bernice Baker Miracle, and Monroe's business manager Inez Melton. Hundreds of spectators crowded the streets around the cemetery. Monroe was later entombed at crypt number 24 at the Corridor of Memories site. In the following decades, several conspiracy theories, including murder and accidental overdose, have been introduced to contradict suicide as the cause of Monroe's death. The speculation that Monroe had been murdered first gained mainstream attention with the publication of Norman Mailer's Marilyn, a biography in 1973, and in the following years became widespread enough for the Los Angeles County District Attorney John Van de Kamp to conduct a threshold investigation in 1982 to see whether a criminal investigation should be opened. No evidence of foul play was. Marilyn Monroe, born Norma Jean Mortensen, June 1, 1926, August 4, 1962, was an American actress and model. Known for playing comic blonde bombshell characters, she became one of the most popular sex symbols of the 1950s and early 1960s, as well as an emblem of the era's sexual revolution. She was a top-billed actress for a decade, and her films grossed $200 million, equivalent to $2 billion in 2023, by the time of her death in 1962. Long after her death, Monroe remains a pop culture icon. In 1999, the American Film Institute ranked her as the 6th greatest female screen legend from the golden age of Hollywood. Born and raised in Los Angeles, Monroe spent most of her childhood in a total of 12 foster homes and an orphanage before marrying James Doherty at age 16. She was working in the factory during World War II when she met a photographer from the First Motion Picture Unit and began a successful pinup modeling career, which led to short-lived of her public image throughout her career, but felt disappointed or typecast and underpaid by the studio. She was briefly suspended in early 1954 for refusing a film project but returned to star in the Suddenly Rich, 1955, one of the biggest box office successes of her career. When the studio was still reluctant to change Monroe's contract, she founded her own film production company in 1954. She dedicated 1955 to building the company and began studying method acting under Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio. Later that year, Fox awarded her a new contract, which gave her more control and a larger salary. Her subsequent roles included a critically acclaimed performance in Bus Stop, 1956, and her first independent production in The Prince and the Showgirl, 1957. She won a Golden Globe for Best Actress for her role in Some Like It Hot, 1959, a critical and commercial success. Her last completed film was the drama The Misfits, 1961. Monroe's troubled private life received much attention as she struggled with addiction and mood disorders. Her marriages to retired baseball star Joe DiMaggio and to playwright Arthur Miller were highly publicized, both ended in divorce. On August 4, 1962, she died at age 36 from an overdose of barbiturates at her Los Angeles home. Her death was ruled a probable suicide. 1926 to 1943, childhood and first marriage. Monroe as an infant, wearing a white dress and sitting on a sheepskin rug. Monroe as an infant, circa 1927. Monroe was born Norma Jean Mortensen on June 1, 1926, at the Los Angeles General Hospital in Los Angeles, California. 6. Her mother, Gladys Pearl Baker, née Monroe, 1902 to 1984, was born in Piedras Negras, Coahuila, Mexico to a poor Midwestern family who migrated to California at the turn of the century. 8. At age 15, Gladys had married John Newton Baker, an abusive man 9 years her senior. They had 2 children together, Robert, 1918 to 1933, and Bernice, 1919 to 2014. She successfully filed for divorce and sole custody of her 2 oldest in 1923, but Baker kidnapped the children soon after and moved with them to his native Kentucky. Monroe was not told that she had a sister until she was 12, and they met for the first time in 1944 when Monroe was 17 or 18. 12. Following the divorce, Gladys worked as a film negative cutter at Consolidated Film Industries. 13. Her second marriage occurred in 1924 when she married Martin Edward Mortensen, but they separated just months later and divorced in 1928. 13b. In 2022, DNA testing indicated that Monroe's father was Charles Stanley Giver, 1898 to 1965, 1819-20, a co-worker of Gladys, with whom she had an affair in 1925. 17. Monroe also had 2 other half-siblings from Gifford's marriage with his first wife, a sister, Doris Elizabeth, 1920 to 1933, and a brother, Charles Stanley, 1922 to 2015. Although Gladys was mentally and financially unprepared for a child, Monroe's early childhood was stable and happy. 22. Gladys placed her daughter with evangelical Christian foster parents Albert and Ida Bolander in the rural town of Hawthorne. She also lived there for 6 months, until she was forced to move back to the city for employment. She then began visiting her daughter on weekends. In the summer of 1933, Gladys bought a small house in Hollywood with a loan from the Homeowners Loan Corporation and moved 7-year-old Monroe in with her. They shared the house with lodgers, actors George and Maude Atkinson and their daughter, Nellie Dodd. In January 1934, Gladys had a mental breakdown and was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. After several months in a rest home, she was committed to the Metropolitan State Hospital. She spent the rest of her life in and out of hospitals and was rarely in contact with Monroe. Monroe became a ward of the state. Over the next 4 years, Monroe's living situation changed often. For the first 16 months, she continued living with the Atkinsons, and may have been sexually abused during this time. Always a shy girl, she now also developed a stutter and became withdrawn. In the summer of 1935, she briefly stayed with Grace and her husband Irwin Doc Goddard and 2 other families. In September 1935, Grace placed her in a Los Angeles orphanage home number 2, Hollywood. The orphanage was a model institution and was described in positive terms by her peers, but Monroe felt abandoned. Encouraged by the orphanage staff, who thought that Monroe would be happier living in a family, Grace became her legal guardian in 1936, but did not take her out of the orphanage until the summer of 1937. Monroe's second stay with the Goddards lasted only a few months because Doc molested her. She then lived for brief periods with her relatives and Grace's friends and relatives and family. Grace became her legal guardian in 1936, but did not take her out of the orphanage until the summer of 1937. Monroe's second stay with the Goddards lasted only a few months because Doc molested her. 44. She then lived for brief periods with her relatives and Grace's friends and relatives in Los Angeles and Compton. Monroe's childhood experiences first made her want to become an actress. I didn't like the world around me because it was kind of grim. When I heard that this was acting, I said that's what I want to be. Some of my foster families used to send me to the movies to get me out of the house, and there I'd sit all day and wait into the night. Up in front, there with the screen so big, a little kid all alone, and I loved it. Monroe found a more permanent home in September 1938, when she began living with Grace's Aunt Hannah Lower in the West Side district of Sawtell. She was enrolled at Emerson Junior High School and went to weekly Christian Science. The same year, she began attending Van Nuys High School. In 1942, the company that employed Doc Goddard relocated him to West Virginia. California child protection laws prevented the Goddards from taking Monroe out of state, and she faced having to return to the orphanage. As a solution, she married their neighbor's 21-year-old son, factory worker James Doherty, on June 19, 1942, just after her 16th birthday. Monroe subsequently dropped out of high school and became a housewife. She found herself and Doherty mismatched, and later said she was dying of boredom during the marriage. In 1943, Doherty enlisted in the Merchant Marine and was stationed on Santa Catalina Island, where Monroe moved with him in April 1944. Doherty was shipped out to the Pacific, where he remained for most of the next 2 years. Monroe moved in with her in-laws and began a job at the Radio Plate Company, a munitions factory in Van Nuys. In late 1944, she met photographer David Conover, who had been sent by Captain Ronald Reagan, then working in the U.S. Army Air Force's 1st Motion Picture Unit, to the factory to shoot morale-boosting pictures of female workers. Although none of her pictures were used, she quit working at the factory in January 1945 and began modeling for Conover and his friends. To find her deployed husband, she moved on her own and signed a contract with the Blue Book Model Agency in August 1945. The agency deemed Monroe's figure more suitable for pin-up than high-fashion modeling, and she was featured mostly in advertisements and men's magazines. To make herself more employable, she straightened her hair and dyed it blonde. 64, according to Emmeline Snively, the agency's owner, Monroe quickly became one of its most ambitious and hard-working models. By early 1946, she had appeared on 33 magazine covers for publications such as Pageant, US Camera, Laugh, and Peak. As a model, Monroe occasionally used the pseudonym Jean Norman. Monroe spent her first 6 months at Fox learning acting, singing, then dancing, and observing the filmmaking process. Her contract was renewed in February 1947, and she was given her first film roles, bit parts in Dangerous Years, 1947, and Scudahoo, Scudahey, 1948. The studio also enrolled her in the Actors Laboratory Theater, an acting school teaching the techniques of the group theater. She later stated that it was my first taste of what real acting in a real drama could be, and I was hooked. Despite her enthusiasm, her teachers thought her too shy and insecure to have a future in acting, and Fox did not renew her contract in August 1947. She returned to modeling while also doing occasional odd jobs at film studios, such as working as a dancing pacer behind the scenes to keep the leads on point at musical sets. When her contract at Columbia ended, Monroe returned again to modeling. She shot a commercial for Pabst Beer and posed for artistic nude photographs by Tom Kelly for John Baumgarth calendars, using the name Mona Monroe. 85. Monroe had previously posed topless or clad in a bikini for other artists including Earl Moran, and felt comfortable with nudity. 86F. Shortly after leaving Columbia, she also met and became the protege and mistress of Johnny Hyde, the vice president of the William Morris Agency. Through Hyde, Monroe landed small roles in several films, including 2 critically acclaimed works, Joseph Mankiewicz's drama All About Eve, 1950, and John Huston's film noir The Asphalt Jungle, 1950. 88. Despite her screen time being only a few minutes in the latter, she gained a mention in photoplay, and according to biographer Donald Spoto moved effectively from movie model to serious actress. 89. In December 1950, Hyde negotiated a 7-year contract for Monroe, a heart attack only days later, which left Monroe devastated. In 1951, Monroe had supporting roles in 3 moderately successful Fox comedies, As Young as You Feel, Love Nest, and Let's Make It Legal. According to Spoto, all 3 films featured her essentially as the sexy ornament, but she received some praise from critics. Bosley Crowther of the New York Times described her as superb in As Young as You Feel, and Desiree Goodman of the Los Angeles Daily News called her one of the brightest up-and-coming actresses for Love Nest. Her popularity with audiences was also growing. She received several thousand fan letters a week, and was declared Miss Cheesecake of 1951 by the Army newspaper Stars and Stripes, reflecting the preferences of soldiers in the Korean War. 95. In February 1952, The Hollywood Foreign Press Association named Monroe the best young box office personality. In her private life,